Welcome to Showcase of Churches, where I interview pastors or leaders of organizations and they tell me how their ministries serve our community. We have such a variety of churches and ministries in our area. And today my guest is Stuart Smith, who is the Executive Director of Love in the Name of Christ in Clackamas County. Stuart also leads a prayer and fasting group and is a workshop speaker at Mission Connection. He will be sharing about both his ministries today. At the end of the show, we will post an information page, and you can get his contact information and Love Inc.'s contact, and we will be time for you to write it down. So, welcome, Casey Stewart.
Hello, Lucy. Thank you so much for having me.
Good. I appreciate you taking time from your busy schedule just to be with us and tell viewers about your ministry. I'd like to start off with you telling us about Love Inc. Ministry. Then later we'll talking about fasting and prayer. On the Clackamas, on the Clackamas Love Inc. website, I see you are part of a national movement. Can you tell us the title of the national movement and what it's about?
Yeah, so the National Love Inc. is just Love Inc. National. They started back in, I think, back in 1977, and the founder, basically he was looking at all the churches and all the things that the churches were doing, mostly were good, but he just found that it was not well organized or orchestrated between different denominations and churches, and not really meeting some of those necessary gaps that are in the community. And so he really kind of assembled a number of different churches together to meet some of those needs that other agencies, whether government or nonprofits, were unable to meet. And so that's where Love Inc. came in.
Good. All right. And so we have some in our area, and I understand that people can go to your website and see the office near them and get in contact. Is that
That's
correct?
Right.
Okay. And then can you tell us where your office is located and where some of the other areas just around our area might be?
Yeah, sure. So our Love Inc. affiliate, so there's about 114 affiliates across the country. And we actually have here in the Pacific Northwest probably about 8 of them right now. And so my affiliate is located, our offices are located in Oregon City, Oregon. But I actually oversee all of Clackamas County. And so we have about 36 different church partnerships that actually partner with us to create what Love Inc. of Clackamas County is. The other affiliates in the Northwest are in Hillsborough. There's one in Tiger Newburgh. There's one in Corvallis and Cowlitz County and Longview, Washington. So there's a number of them that are sprinkled around the community here in the Northwest.
Good. And I see that people can actually go into your website. There's a map, and they can check it out and put in the state they want, and then they can connect. Because they might want to refer this to a friend, too, in another state. Okay. Now,
That's right.
The website says Clackamas Churches and Love Inc. provides social, material, and spiritual care. So can you give me some specific ideas in each category?
Yeah, and so the heart behind Love Inc. and what we're attempting to do is actually to meet the whole person in their place of crisis or their place of poverty. And so the things that we offer to the community members that we serve, our clientele, we want to meet them where their relationships are, where their material needs are, where their emotional needs are, their spiritual needs, of course. And so we want to really make a whole person out of these individuals. and it takes the whole it takes the whole body of Christ to do that. It takes every church and every denomination to be able to meet the needs of the community, and that's what Love Inc. does. We connect the people with the churches to the people. Generally, so the people that are on the fringes, that the churches don't have maybe the opportunity to go out and reach because of the different churches, how the churches may be perceived in the community.
Okay, so is that things like food and clothes and counseling
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, so sorry. Yeah, so we don't actually do food or clothing because there's a lot of great other agencies and
Right.
nonprofits that cover those things. We
Okay.
cover areas that we fill the gap is what we call it. And so
Okay.
we can furnish homes. We can give out firewood to clients,
Oh.
shoes for their feet. We have a great durable medical equipment ministry, which provides medical equipment for people and as well as children's clothing and children's items as well. So a lot of the other agencies that maybe provide food, clothing, shelter are phenomenal, but where the other between the agencies and other nonprofits, we fill those gaps.
Good,
That's our mode
good.
of operation.
Well, that's good, and that you have a specific thing going on. Okay, so then how do you partner with these churches? How does that all work out and play out?
Yeah, so again, Love Inc. only exists because of our church partnerships. Love Inc. is not an isolated ministry, but we actually are an affiliation of partnerships within the church communities. And so,
Okay.
what that means from a church partner is that we resource some of their own benevolence that they might use. We resource their volunteers, and there's some of their members as well. But we are a community. Love Inc. is a community of churches working together to solve the issue of poverty.
Good, good. Now, are you in need of volunteers? And then what is the process a volunteer would go through, to get to be a volunteer?
Yes, yeah, so that's a great question. And so, yeah, we do have a great need for volunteers, especially right now. I think between churches and almost every nonprofit that I'm familiar with, we are in great need of servants, servant leaders, and servant volunteers. And really, that just comes down to, for us specifically, it comes down to going onto our website, to our volunteer page, and then filling out a volunteer inquiry. We'll follow that up with an application, and because we do want to make sure, because the clientele that we are working with, that we do vet our volunteers and we do vet the people that we're working with.
Of course.
Depending on where you might serve, you
Mm-hmm.
might be working with individuals who are escaping domestic violence, and we just want to make sure that the people that we're having volunteer with us are prepared for stuff like that. So.
Right. Okay. And then at your particular location, is there a specific need? I mean, do you need technical? Do you need counselors? Do you, right now at your location?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so for us right now, we are looking across the board, everything like you mentioned, from counselors to people who can vacuum the floors for us, but then
Okay.
also meet with the clients where they are. We are working on some new campaigns for social media and some other communication, some marketing communication that we're going after. So I love if anybody has social media or website design, or creative or graphic artists, individuals like that would be an extreme help for us right now.
Good. And then how are you funded?
Sure. So we are actually funded by individuals and from churches, and so probably about 70% of our funding comes from individual donors, and then
Okay.
about 25 to 30% come from church partners, our church partnerships.
Good. Good. Okay. All right. And I see that you offer classes and a newsletter. So can you tell us about those? What are these classes first?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so again, our whole position is to help individuals come into a wholeness of being, and that wholeness of being means there's education part of that, but it's also all built through relationships. And so when we talk about the individuals that we work with, we're not a place that just hands out items or hands out material goods, but we're a place that actually transforms and restores people back to biblical health is the goal.
Okay.
I mean, for all of us, right? For myself included, the ultimate goal is biblical health, what we see in the scriptures, Christ likeness. And so our transformational classes, they actually are working at different points of pain in people's lives. It could
Okay.
be on parenting, could be cooking on a budget. It could be creating a budget. It could be one of our more popular classes, maybe to a misfortune, is our domestic violence classes that helps
Mm.
moms that are escaping and fleeing domestic violence, and helps to restore their identity of who they are, chiefly their identity in Christ.
Okay. And then their newsletter just probably updates them on everything you're doing. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, good.
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
All right. Well, before we move on to what you want to say about fasting, lament, and prayer, is there anything else you want to
Mhm.
add that we haven't talked about that you'd like to tell people about Love Inc?
Yeah, so yeah, again, Love Inc. is one of those. It's just a phenomenal ministry. I've been in the church. I've been a pastor for several years, and Love Inc. is one of those partnerships for the churches that actually restores their health, their growth, and it actually is an accelerant to growth in the church. And it's also helps provide fruit for the church. Our again, one of our chief goals is to not only meet the needs of our community members, but is actually to put those community members into your church. And so, for any church pastor or church ministry leader, our goal is again to work with the individuals that are on the fringes of our community and put them into your pews and ultimately into your small groups, and to help grow your church. Some
Good.
of the fun stuff, as an example, as far as church health, if your church is struggling in maybe attendance or other challenges, uh, a partnership with Love Inc. can actually restore health because it gives a shared experience when they're working with individuals in the community and really serving in a way that God has made us, which is to bring people to a knowledge of Himself through our actions.
Good, very good. All right, so now we'll move on to an interesting topic because you also teach, and I met you actually at Mission Connection where you were teaching a workshop on fasting, lament, and
Yeah,
prayer.
that's right.
Yeah, and so
Yeah,
we
that's
don't
right.
hear about lament real often. We hear about fasting and prayer sometimes, right? So, can you tell me how you think lament, fasting, and prayer work in part of the Great Commission? And maybe you might want to explain the Great
Yeah,
Commission if everybody doesn't know what that is. We don't want to throw out a
yeah,
Christianese word that.
yes. Yeah, of course. And so, yeah, so I had a wonderful time. Bill McLeod has become a good friend of mine. He's the co-founder, or he is the founder of Mission Connection Northwest here in the Northwest. And the exciting part is, they have all these different tracks and all these different opportunities for individuals to learn from people that are maybe wiser than themselves. I don't know where I fit in that spot, but I did get a chance to offer up a track which was called Prayer, Fasting, and Lament, and how that's connected to the Great Commission. And I guess firstly, the idea of what prayer is really developing an intimate relationship with God through conversation.
Okay.
Fasting is allowing ourselves or relieving ourselves of worldly items or temptations or challenges or things that we might hold on to in the physical world. And so the way I think Andrew Murray put it, for example, is that fasting is our upward expression of an inward desire to worship God, and fasting is our inward expression of releasing physical items from our lives so that we can move more freely with our relationship with God. And so fasting and prayer really work together, but they're two sides of the same coin in that space. And so prayer again is that conversation with God, and then fasting is releasing the worldly temptations, releasing those other items, so that we can have a closer proximity to God Himself. With lament, it is a little bit more of a different twist, uh, because the idea of lament, at least from the standpoint that I was taking it from, was that lament a lot of times is the outward expression of a broken heart or brokenness. And so, like as an example, a worldly lament is a broken heart or an outward expression of a broken heart for the loss of something or someone. If we have, I mean, if you attend a funeral or something like that, there's a deep lament for the loss of a friend. Or the lament I was communicating is a more of a biblical lament, which is actually the lamenting for that person who is lost before they've passed away or before they become lost to us.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea of how that's connected to the Great Commission is how are we lamenting the lost souls around the planet, around the globe, and around the world who, if they were to pass today, would spend an eternity separated from a loving God. And so the lament that's connected to prayer and fasting is developing a broken heart for the lost, and that brings a outward expression of brokenness and through lament. And so how it's connected to the Great Commission is really when Jesus tells us in starting in Matthew 22, he says that the Great Commandment is to love God, love people as yourself. And so the way that you're supposed to be loving other people is the way that you have love for yourself. I like myself pretty well. I don't quite love other people
As
the
well.
same way that I love
As well.
myself, and that's a challenge, right?
Right, for everyone.
So that is again that's a biblical commandment that God says, love me, and then love other people the way that you love yourself. And then of course the Great Commission for Matthew 28. Jesus says, as he's commissioning his disciples, and that's a present tense, so he's commissioning us as well to go into all the world and share the gospel and making disciples of people. And it's difficult to do that if you don't have a brokenness, because there's a commandment we're supposed to do it, so we do it out of obedience. But I think the motives and the drive that comes behind that is for a brokenness or a sorrow, a deep lament, sorrow for the brokenness of different maybe places in this world. And I think that's those two in conjunction drive us into the more difficult regions in our world that lack maybe different comforts that we might be familiar with. And so I know several people that are in very, very challenging and difficult regions in our world because they have a deep lament for their
Mm.
potential loss without
Mm-hmm.
Christ.
Right. And I think our society right now, there's a lot of things that could be lamented just about our own society. You know,
Yeah,
also in the Bible, it says when you fast. It doesn't say, doesn't Jesus doesn't
right.
just say if you do, when you do, and then you don't show off
That's
to
right.
everybody, yay, I'm fasting, look at me, I'm in self denial. But also, I feel it gives your prayers a little more punch. Like Queen Esther, when she fasted, it was
Yeah,
for her whole kingdom. Well, fast with me. We're in this, dangerous state of being annihilated, and
mhm,
this is one of the remedies is to do fasting and prayer. We also see King David, who both lamented and
yeah,
fasted
yeah,
and did psalms of lament. And then we have the prophetess Anna and Paul. And some people it was a lifestyle, right? This was a regular
yeah,
deal to fast, and then other ones it was urgent. Or like David when he
yeah.
loses a baby, he's in grief and fast. You know, so anyway,
Yeah,
well,
and other examples. One of my favorite ones is Nehemiah.
mhm,
He was lamenting, and so this kind of comes to all of that. He was praying
mhm,
for because he heard about the disparity of Jerusalem and Israel. He
mhm.
was praying, he was lamenting, and he was fasting, and those were the key elements that opened the door. I think it was the see if I can remember my Bible here right now. Artaxerxes, I think it was, who gave him the commissioning to go and fix the Israel and to
Right,
go
right,
fix the walls and
right,
the
right,
gates that were burnt with fire.
right.
And I mean, those three elements together opened the doors, in other
Mhm.
words, for him to do the work that he had to go do.
Right, and it wasn't an easy job. He had a few interruptions and,
No.
and
Yep.
troublemakers
There's
along the way.
it's a great story. It's a Hollywood made for Hollywood story, that's for
Yeah,
sure.
make a good movie, wouldn't it? Okay. Well, besides doing a Bible study or a topic on prayer, are there books or resources you could recommend to people? Maybe they haven't tried fasting. It's not something everybody has
Yeah.
tried or realizes the benefit of. So, is there any other resource? I
Yeah.
mean, I know they could go through the Bible, get out their topical Bible or Strong's Concordance and look up all the verses on fasting and do that. But I know
Yeah.
I read one years ago, God's Chosen Fast. This was really good.
Hmm.
It told people
Sure.
even how to start a fast and how to end it, and especially if they were new. So, are there any you can recommend?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few. I guess specifically with fasting, I recognize in my study, my reading for about fasting specifically, the Bible really is the greatest resource that we have. Of
Right.
course, some of the other ones that are good that I have read, like the one you had mentioned. My favorite one personally is "The Hunger for God" by John Piper.
Okay.
He just goes into great detail of what is the purpose behind fasting, like why is it such a necessity, why does
Mm-hmm.
it need to be a commonplace, but then
Okay.
also things to watch out for, some pitfalls that, like you had mentioned, is the things that we don't want to have during our time for fasting. So,
Right.
and then
Right.
Andrew Murray, I think, has written a couple books on prayer and
Right.
fasting,
Right.
which are phenomenal.
And
So
humility too.
yeah,
He
those are
has
some
a
good
really
ones.
good book on humility. Okay. Well, I guess
Yeah.
we've got to close up here pretty quick, but is there anything short that's on your heart before we close out that you want to tell the viewers?
Yeah, well, again, just thank you so much for having me, Lucy, and I just so appreciate all the work that you're doing. For anyone who is watching this, just continue. What is it? Galatians 6:9 is don't grow weary in doing good.
Okay,
So I just want
right.
to encourage you and exhort you guys just to
Okay,
stay strong,
okay.
stay faithful, keep an eye and an earmark on holiness. I think that's for me with prayer, fasting, and lament, is that
Mm-hmm.
it also reveals to me my proximity to God and my proximity to the world.
Right.
I recognize that the better my prayer life is,
Mm-hmm.
the closer I feel to God, and the stronger my fasting is. The same thing.
Right.
If I'm lacking in my prayer and I'm lacking in fasting,
Mm-hmm.
I tend to be a little bit closer to the earth.
Right,
So I just want to
exactly.
encourage you to,
Exactly. Okay.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And so I just want to encourage you guys that staying humble, staying close to God is so so worth it. And I
Okay.
know that you know that, but it's an important thing. It's beautiful.
Thanks. And now, if you could grab pen, paper, whatever you want to record contact information, we will have an information with how you can go into Love Inc. and contact their group. So thank you for listening, and thank you, Cubby, to Showcase of Churches.
Thank you. Sounds great. Thank you, guys. That was fun.